Welcome to the show this morning. It is Daniel Wortman coming to you live from the Dream Imagine Sports Studios. It is 9 a.m. on the East Coast. This is your 6 a.m. West Coast wake-up call in all time zones in between and around the world. Thanks for tuning in this Wednesday morning, June the 26th. We will be joined in a few minutes by Chris Kivlehand. We are excited to chat with him. He's a writer for the Midfield Press. And we will be getting to him shortly. But one of the things I wanted to talk about today is where we are as a country. Like, what are we aiming for? What are we hoping to achieve as a country, as a federation? There are a lot of ways to look at this. There are a lot of things that we can consider when we look at our aspirations as a country. For some, it is we want to see Major League Soccer succeed. Success for others is getting more kids to participate, getting more people to participate. All of those are admirable goals. Wanting the Major League Soccer to be a quality, excellent product. I mean, that's a good goal. We need a better level in this country. We need it to actually strive for excellence. That's good. Getting more kids playing, that's good. But ultimately, is that really our goal? Is that the only goal? And for me, when I look at American soccer, the thing that I constantly think about is my goal for American soccer is that we as a country become the greatest soccer country on earth. That should be our goal. If we become the greatest soccer country on earth, and we aspire to become the greatest soccer country on earth, if that becomes our mission, then Major League Soccer or some other league has to strive to be the best league in the world. It has to strive for excellence. That means that mediocrity is not only not tolerated, mediocrity becomes something that is frowned upon, that we don't scream for parity. We don't scream for average. We don't hope for average teams, average results, every team mired in mediocrity. Instead, we aspire for greatness. And we hope that our teams become great and that they're filled with great players. And we understand that in that pursuit, there will be some that rise, some that will struggle, and it will go in cycles. And that some teams will get it right for a few years and then they will struggle. There will be other teams that will not get it right for a while and they'll figure it out. They'll double down. They'll reinvest. If we aspire to become the greatest soccer country on earth, we will have more kids playing. Why? Because access and opportunity is a large part of becoming the greatest soccer country on earth. Getting more kids into the game, giving them more access and more opportunities to participate at all levels would become a priority because it would be about becoming the greatest soccer country on earth. There are a lot of families who can't afford to pay a lot of money per year to play soccer. But there are a lot of others who cannot. And there are a lot of kids who pay to play soccer who think that because they are paying money that their kids are really good. And they're not. They're terrible. And the metric that has been used is a socioeconomic standard, not a quality of play. We cannot become the greatest soccer country on earth as long as our focus on quality is down to the checkbooks of the parents. To become the greatest soccer country on earth, we no longer need to have a system focused on extorting money from families in order to play the game. There are ways for clubs to create a lot of revenue, to create businesses that support them, to create opportunities to not have to lean on families so heavily in order to do their programming. But as long as our federation doesn't aspire to become the greatest soccer country on earth, that's the easy way out. It's the easy way to get the money, is to just say, here's our marketing, here's our offer to you. You want to play, and you want to play at a high level, you've got to come play with us. And oh, by the way, this is how much it costs. We're not providing our kids with elite opportunities to play. We're providing them with expensive opportunities to play. Kids need the opportunity to rise and fall on their own merit, not mom or dad's checkbook. And until our system rewards the clubs that produce and develop the best players on the field, until we have a system that honors FIFA compliance in the areas of solidarity payments and training compensation, we will continue to look to the wrong places to measure ourselves, to decide whether we are or are not good enough. Our country could be, and I think should be, the greatest soccer country on earth, but we will never get there until we decide as a country, and until our federation leadership decides for itself that that is our goal. If that becomes our goal, everything else can fall into alignment, and we can unleash the potential for our future players to achieve like no other country in the world. I truly believe that, and I hope that at some point in American soccer, we reach that level. Our sponsor this half hour is Dutkick Brand. You can learn more about Dutkick at dutkigbrand.com. And when you go and place your order, use promo code DWSHOW. Again, that is DWSHOW to get 10% off of your order. I promise you, the stuff that they offer is amazing. The notebooks, all of it. It's worth your time. Take a look at it. Dutkickbrand.com. We'll be right back after this with Chris Kivlahan. Welcome back into the show. Thanks for tuning in this Wednesday morning. We are joined by Chris Kivlahan, a writer with Midfield Press. Chris, welcome to the show this morning. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming on the show. We are excited to get some time to talk with you, and you do a lot of work covering all aspects of American soccer. And one of the things that I wanted to kind of chat with you about first and foremost is the CEO position with U.S. Soccer. There's been a lot of chatter behind the scenes around U.S. Soccer that we obviously need a new CEO. It was announced at the 2019 AGM that Dan Flynn is indeed finally going to be walking away from the job, and U.S. Soccer is going to have to hire a new CEO. And, there's a couple of names that have been floating around that really want the job. One is Jay Berhalter, and the other is John Collins. What have you seen or heard in this CEO search in terms of a replacement for Dan Flynn?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds certainly from all the chatter that's out there that Jay Berhalter is the preferred choice. But when I think about how they should look at this position, I think that you can't really have somebody from the inside, come in and have it be credible, whether it's Berhalter or whether it's John Collins, who's been on the board for a long time. For folks who don't know who he is, it's got to be somebody from the outside, and frankly, that's not even really good enough. You really have to make some fundamental changes in the way the board itself works.
Speaking of the board, which is ultimately tasked with this job of hiring a CEO, the structure of the board is set up in a way that protects status quo. It basically welcomes conflicts of interest. It puts a giant welcome sign to conflicts of interest, and probably the biggest conflict of interest of all is the fact that Don Garber sits on the board, CEO of Soccer United Marketing and the commissioner of Major League Soccer, and yet has direct say on who the next CEO is and U.S. soccer decisions in general. What do you see with the structure of the U.S. Soccer board in regards to not only hiring this CEO, but these conflicts of interest and other issues in terms of the way it is structured?
Yeah, I mean, my opinion is that we would be better off if the board consisted of a majority of independent directors. Right now, there are 3 independent director positions on the board. Only 2 of them are filled, I think if you really want a board that is making decisions that are free of conflicts of interest, you have to have people who aren't conflicted. And right now, you got, essentially Soccer United Marketing is a vendor, to U.S. Soccer. Yet possibly the most powerful person on that board is the CEO of Soccer United Marketing. I mean, it's just clearly conflicted. You look at the leading candidate for the CEO position being Jay Berhalter, who is the brother of the head coach of the men's national team, who he's upstream from, right? He would be upstream from if he was the CEO. It's rife with conflict of interest. And as you mentioned, it is, it appears to welcome conflicts of interest, and it's really just not acceptable.
One of the things that I think people don't fully understand when we talk about U.S. soccer, it is that, it is the national governing body for the sport in the United States, but it is constructed in the way that its rules are written, in the way that it operates, its governance, its systems, its structure, very much like a country club. not like a national governing body. So the points that you bring up about independent directors, we see this as a pattern. It's part of the culture of U.S. soccer to not construct itself or to look to try to do things in a way that avoid even an appearance of conflicts of interest. They've actually written exemption clauses for themselves to be exempt of conflicts of interest at a board level. So looking at that and looking at this CEO position, how important is it to you that this hire be someone with little to absolutely no connections to U.S. soccer in any way, shape, form, or fashion in terms of a leadership role or history with the U.S. Soccer Federation?
I mean, I think that would be nice, but ultimately, I think that whoever gets put into that position is, risks being a figurehead, right? Even if they are independent of the conflicts of interest brought in from the outside, if they're just one person who's like that, right? They risk being a figurehead. They risk, being, isolated, right? With the real power lying with the status quo, right? Which is why I go back to the idea of, I really think that the stakeholders of U.S. soccer, the different associations, the different councils should really think about, the idea of a majority of independent directors, as a change to the way the board are structured. Because until you change the way that whole dynamic works, the corruption is very deep, right? And you could put one person in there, but, are they really going to be the one calling the shots? I think that now if you have a number of independent people who in there are a majority, now I think you can have that independence sort of take hold. And by the way, that they may choose not to change anything. They may say, you know what, Soccer United Marketing is the best possible vendor for us. Let's keep that going, right? They may, as independents, take a look at that and make that judgment. Or they may say, we shouldn't do a no-bid contract. We should bid this out, right? Maybe we shouldn't have a CEO whose, brother is the head coach of the men's national team. They could go either way. I would just be much more comfortable if you had independent people making those determinations rather than people who have, some pretty clear conflicts of interest.
And all of that being said, what do you think about these revelations from Glassdoor.com about the U.S. soccer employees, current, past employees, speaking of the culture and the relationships within U.S. soccer and the problems that they have with, in particular, Jay Berhalter, but also CEO Dan Flynn and the way things are run. Do you think that if a CEO is brought in that is independent, that doesn't have those conflicts of interest, do you think that by, looking at some of the comments from the staff, that maybe that would be received at least from the rank and file within U.S. soccer itself? Maybe yes, some of the board stuff, but do you think they would get some support down the pyramid from them?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think what you're just reading, and I think it's important to point out that several people have independently authenticated those Glassdoor reviews as being, reflective of current and former employees, right? So I believe Paul Kennedy has done that. I believe the New York Times did it, and I think Mickey Turner has also done that. So there's several people who've validated, that they are at least reflective of the feelings of the employees. What that just comes down to, I think, in any organization, is it's bad leadership. It's arrogant leadership. It's leadership that's out of touch, right? So look, you could have someone who's conflicted become the CEO, who's just a better leader, and I think it would improve those things, right? Regardless of their independence. I think they just need somebody who is a little bit more humble, in that role than what those comments would indicate, and who's more interested in treating other people with respect. So I think that's probably the issue for the employees.
Speaking of conflict, strife, disunity, we can keep using all kinds of catastrophic adjectives to describe lower league soccer in general in America. And I don't think we would use enough adjectives to fully describe some of the issues that we see. How do we get from where we are today to a place where things are in alignment? I mean, we see, NISA is trying to get off the ground. They kind of keep shooting themselves in the foot here and there with, PR and this, that, and the other, trying to get some things sorted. And I know they're trying to dot I's and cross T's and all of that. But you also have the NPSL. Then you have the Founders Cup group of teams, UPSL, all of these different leagues. Then you get into regional leagues. How do we get from this place where we have basically league wars to getting clubs and leagues to come together and find a way to connect to one another?
Yeah, I think it's really important. It's kind of been a central theme of a lot of the things that I've written about for the past couple of years is the need for the independent soccer clubs to work together rather than have leagues work against each other. So I think that we're seeing some of that start to emerge now, maybe a little bit better than it has been before. But at least that's what I'm seeing kind of behind the scenes, is some hopeful signs that people may start crossing some of those lines and working together more. I mean, you've had several things that I think that have been important over the last 6 to 9 months in those regards. NISA getting sanctioned, I think, was important for them. I don't think there would be a NISA anymore if they didn't get sanctioned. Those investor groups probably would have scattered to the wind. Some of them would have stuck around, obviously, but them getting sanctioned was important. The Founders Cup, on the other hand, has struggled to get sanctioned, whether it's by the as sort of part of the NPSL, whether it's through USASA or other bodies. They've struggled to get sanctioned, which creates some problems for them if they wanted to use national team eligible players and things of that nature. So that I think has put some of those clubs in a position where they kind of need to figure out what they're going to do next. I think on the UPSL side, they've recently been sued by USL and what seems to be a pretty frivolous grounds based on the using the sort of English style league names, right? So yeah, I mean, I think these groups sort of see that, the MLS USL type of structure, is very organized, right? And moves in the organized way. Whereas, they've sort of been independent and pulling in different directions. They can't win if they're pulling in different directions against a better funded group that sort of has the backing of the federation that is better organized than them. It's not going to work.
So looking at where we are, let's start right now with NISA. Let's dig into that because I know a lot of people have a lot of questions about NISA. What is it that they've been very mysterious in really putting out information and in even to the point of club names and all of that. It's really been slow to kind of figure out what are you learning about NISA? What are you hearing in terms of, when they aim to kick a ball and announce clubs and really kind of lift the veil for the public to be able to get a real good look at NISA as an organization, as a league, as a group of clubs?
Yeah, I think it's important to acknowledge that NISA did a very poor job from the time they were sanctioned up until about the end of May in communicating with the public. It was understandable given the difficult process that is the sanctioning process, that they wanted to be quiet during it. Like, I think everybody can understand that given what happened with the NASL, how strongly positioned USL is with the USSF, and the fact that NISA is competing, at a Division III level with a USL property. So I think that was understandable. The thing that wasn't understandable was why NISA was so quiet between when they were sanctioned and the end of May. So what ended up happening at the end of May was there was a change in leadership. So John Pruch took over as the commissioner, and I was able to do 2 interviews with him that shared some information. The second one, a little bit more than the first one. What we learned in that was that that they're going to kick off on September 7th of this year. That's going to be when the first matches are. We learned that Miami FC has joined NISA. Not clear that they're going to start in the fall because they are committed to the Founders Cup. There would be nothing preventing them from playing in both in theory, right? But that's not clear. California United Strikers have joined NISA, so there are 2 known entities, right, that have joined NISA. You've got the branding for the Charlotte metro area team has leaked out, and I think we're very likely to see an announcement from them soon based on a tweet from their leader that indicated this would be a busy week for him. And I think we know about San Diego 1904 being in the league. The LA team is associated with the owner of FC Golden State. Not clear to me if that's going to be the brand. I've heard they might use a Los Angeles brand for the pro team. But the Philadelphia Fury are known to be the team in Philadelphia. That's public knowledge at this point. So some of the teams have emerged, but still not a lot known about the team in Providence. Not a lot known about the team in Connecticut. At least publicly known. There are rumors. Not a lot known about the team in Baton Rouge, Louisiana yet. So there's a lot for NISA to share with the public that they haven't done yet. But we have at least started to learn some things in the last month, that have improved the situation.
In terms of your conversations with John, did he share any aspirations to follow a similar path of regionalization or conference play, or East West, or maybe 4 conferences for NISA, rather than trying to get teams at 3rd division to travel from Philadelphia to Los Angeles, or is this going to be viewed as, hey, we're going to go national and everybody's going to have to travel all over the place?
Yeah, the indication, I believe in the second interview, was that there will be regionalized play. So I don't know exactly how that will work, because there are basically 3 teams in Southern California, and then there are teams kind of up the East Coast. So it's not clear to me how you're going to do that, but that's what he said, was that the fall 2019 season would be regionalized play. So, and I think that's ultimately what makes sense at the Division three level anyway, you probably want to have something like 4 regions, right? Eventually, once you have enough teams for that.
Yeah, I mean, look, the biggest thing that we have to recognize when we look at our structure and system in America, we are asking teams to play a continental schedule if you look at it in comparison to Europe. So Chelsea's not traveling to play Bayern Munich on Saturday. That's not part of their regular league schedule. They're getting in a bus traveling around London to Arsenal, or they are, maybe they have a short plane ride here or there, or they're taking a train or a bus somewhere, but like it's not getting in an airplane and flying, the same distance as Los Angeles to Philadelphia or Miami to Seattle. So when we think about our structure in America, we've got to take that into account and realize that, even at a first division level, we probably should be finding ways to regionalize, similar to like college sports. Allow the fans to travel. Allow that imagine if Atlanta United, for example, was traveling to play another team in Atlanta or Charlotte or Nashville or Birmingham, New Orleans. This kind of footprint where fans could get around and really follow the team rather than, having Atlanta kind of on an island. Now you're going to have Nashville coming in, but outside of that, there's not a lot else around Atlanta in terms of teams and rivalries, and the next closest one would be Orlando. And so you have giant, parts of the country, even in the first division, that don't have that kind of reach or coverage. The travelability piece for fans, I think, is one thing we miss out on a lot. And so I think it's important with leagues like a project like NISA to take that into account and figure out ways for these clubs to develop local, regional rivalries, allow the fans to get out to matches, and really, connect with these clubs. It's going to be very difficult for, a San Diego, 1904 to have any kind of support and any kind of following when they are away at Philadelphia, and we see this in MLS. I mean, it's part of the issue with MLS is a league trying to play continental. Even our top leagues in this country don't do that. In baseball, basketball, American football, they don't do that. Do they play around the country? Yes, but they have an area that they primarily play out of, and then they supplement the rest. And so, I think that's something that we've got to rethink with American soccer. One other thing with NISA that I'm curious about, I know at one point Peter Wilt was involved, and there was Class A shares, Class B shares, Class C shares, and third-party ownership of leagues is a real problem when you look at getting structured for an open system. You really need 100% of the league owned by the member clubs themselves, so that they have full autonomy to make decisions for themselves and be able to exchange those shares, when they're moving up or moving down, etc. So what have you learned about NISA's governance and structure? Have they revealed any of that in terms of where they're at now versus where they were when Peter left the project?
Yeah, my understanding is, and I haven't spoken on the record with anybody about this, in quite some time. But my understanding is that it's generally the same as what Peter described, almost 2 years ago, at this point, with the Class A shares, which are owned by the clubs, right? The Class B shares, which were owned by the company that Peter and Jack Cummins had, and then the Class C shares, which are, for outside investors. So So my understanding is that structure is pretty much intact, but I think that's something that would probably be a better question for someone who's an insider in NISA, is more familiar with that. But the latest I've heard is consistent with that.
So in your conversations with clubs around the country, I know a lot of people looked at NISA as a possibility for their own clubs or, something that they would like to see as an alternative. Right now, it and the conversation surrounding the Founders Cup are the only two, outside of Major League Soccer and the USL projects that are even being discussed. I wouldn't call either of them viable yet because neither have launched, neither have kicked a ball, and there's no way to tell where we are 6 months from now or a year from now. But looking at the landscape of American soccer, what are you hearing from clubs around the country in terms of interest in NISA and interest in finding a way to play longer season soccer and professional soccer without having to join the USL system of leagues or Major League Soccer?
Yeah, there's a lot of interest in having the professional soccer teams across the country in a variety of markets. That would be, in whether it would be in NISA or whether it would be in a league that followed the Founders Cup, that would be an independent league. There are a lot of groups that are interested. I think one thing that NISA has that's very positive, to contrast with your point about the ownership structure and potential problems there. One thing that I think NISA is getting right is the lack of territory rights and the lack of a franchise fee. Those things lend themselves to a broader system that could eventually have promotion and relegation. Right. The big challenge, I think, when you look at USL, there's a lot of hope among USL team fans that one day USL will implement promotion and relegation, but you have a fundamental challenge of, if I paid, USL, the league, $7 million for a franchise and I get relegated and now, in USL League One and that franchise value is, $800,000. Like that's a pretty big hit that I just took. Right. And if I'm a U.S. minor league sports owner, which a lot of those newer groups are, that might be hard to swallow, right? So I think NISA kind of starting out without franchise fees and starting out with no territory rights sets it up well. And if you want to have two teams in New Orleans, you can have two teams in New Orleans, right? And sort of the best team will win out, right? In terms of who creates a better fan experience and who runs the business better, and of course, who plays better on the field, right? Through merit, right? So yeah, I think that those are some good things that NISA has going for it in their model. Founders Cup, I think there's a lot of appeal in the idea of something that is just very separated from the structure of U.S. soccer as it exists. One of the things that people who want to see something different don't like about NISA is that it is under the pro league standards, right? So you can't have a Detroit City as they exist today join NISA, right? They would have to take on 35% ownership from an individual with over 10 million net worths, right? With all the caveats that go along with that in the PLS. So, that's unattractive just based on what the PLS are and how they're set up. Because you look at a club like Detroit City and you say, that's it done right. That should be the model, right? That should be what people are aspiring towards for building something from the grassroots and building it up into, a club that gets over 5,000 fans a game, has its own venue that it has a lot of control over, creates a wonderful fan experience. And I think, but the PLS discourage that, right? They encourage having a wealthy investor, come in and make a top-down investment rather than growth from the bottom up. So, by complying with the PLS, NISA has that issue, which I think is a valid complaint. The only challenge is that no one has successfully created an alternative outside of the PLS yet, and the Founders Cup has struggled to do that.
Certainly have, and part of that struggle is, how much is self-inflicted versus how much is coming from above, and you see the dispute being discussed as to why there's been some issues there having to deal with insurance. Yet we see amateur teams play professional teams all the time in the U.S. Open Cup, and teams have registered professional players within the NPSL and USASA for years, and have played and lined up against amateur teams and amateur players during their entire existence. So, I find some of that to be a little disingenuous from U.S. Soccer, from USASA and USSSA and the NPSL, all who have been involved in some way, shape, form, or fashion with sanctioning the Founders Cup. When we look at the teams that are aspiring to be a part of something like that and build from the grassroots, and you mentioned Detroit City, you mentioned Chattanooga. When you look at those two clubs in particular, they are a prime example of why the professional league standards were written to provide asset protection and artificial scarcity to improve asset values for closed leagues, because those rules are written in a way that really have little to do with a club or with the game of soccer, and it has to do with wealth, and that's used as kind of an arbitrary weapon against a setup like Chattanooga and their recent success in opening up to the public the opportunity to buy shares in the club, or the work that Detroit City have done in terms of the way that they have built from the grassroots and built up. So when we look at that and we look at that structure and compare that to Europe, for example, look in England, the investigation into a club, can it pay its bills, can it not pay its bills, is based on the club. Now, could the owner personally be wealthy and guarantee that their bills are going to get paid? Absolutely. So it's not to say that having someone worth $10 million is a detriment to your club, and it's not to say that could not be used for some clubs to say, hey, look, we're viable. I'm Rocco Camiso. I'm worth billions of dollars. I can pay my bills. That is certainly one way to prove that your club is viable. But I think there are other ways, like IBAR, and you look at other clubs that have found ways to do things without having to just rely on net worth of an owner. And that's going to be a piece to me when we kind of turn the conversation back to NISA, where I see some issues for the growth of NISA, because I think there are going to be a lot of clubs that will want to be a part of that, and especially when you start getting to the level where promotion and relegation conversations start to come into play, where those rules, the professional league standards, are going to be a problem for the growth of the game. And who knows? Maybe some of the legal challenges will get those tossed or rewritten. But until then, it's going to be a hurdle. When you look at the clubs that are interested in doing something beyond what is available now, short season NPSL, UPSL, and really want to play at a higher level, professional. And by professional, I mean it does not necessarily mean they're looking to go out and put $1 million, player contracts on the field, but they may be paying guys, $25,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a year to play, but they don't have that owner worth $10 million. How hard is that going to be for a project like NISA once they get beyond this first wave of teams that are able to meet those U.S. Soccer Professional League standard demands?
Yeah, so I do think that there are, from everything I hear, there are quite a few interested parties when it comes to NISA. But I think you're absolutely right that the pro league standards need to be readdressed, and they need to be rewritten in a way that considers other ways that clubs can be sustainable. Right? If we assume the reason for a 10 million net worth owner at the D3 level and a 20 million net worth owner at the D2 level is that the people with those net worths or greater would be able to sustain a club, and eat some losses, right? And keep the club going. Right now, given the amount of money that many Division II teams lose, somebody who is literally at 20 million net worth isn't going to be at 20 million net worth very long if they own a Division II soccer team, because those clubs lose millions a year. But there needs to be other things considered. So there's a couple ways to do that. There could be something based on the club itself and its finances, right? There could be, someone like Detroit City generates a considerable amount of revenue, and if they can operate a business successfully within the revenue that they have, then why shouldn't that be good enough, right? At a professional level, Then another way that has been discussed, I think, back when the discussion was around Rocco Caniso putting money into a league to help it grow. There was the idea of a fund that was controlled by the league, right? That would be separate from any individual team, but would back teams, right? And this is something that, from what I understand, has made its way into NISA. Something called a sustainability fund. I've heard about that's a amount of money that the league has that can back, sort of be a stopgap, right? Now in Rocco's case, he was talking about a very large amount of money that he was willing to invest. But if you had a mechanism where whatever league system it was had a fund that said, okay, if a club's failing, we'll guarantee that club will finish the season, and the fund will pay it down, right? Pay their expenses. Does that meet what the point of the PLS was? Is the point to make those clubs at least sustainable through whatever season they're playing in? I mean, I think there are other ways you could get at having the clubs be sustainable other than having a 20 million net worth owner or a 10 million net worth owner. So I think that the standard should be open-minded to some different ways of accomplishing it.
Yeah,
especially given the success of Chattanooga and Detroit. Now, Chattanooga does have owners who need PLS, but that should be celebrated, right? That should be encouraged, right? Because it's actually from the grassroots all the way up. So they should really think about changing the PLS to open up to some other ways of being qualified.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think that's a big point moving forward. And until some of those changes are made, I think there's going to be a glass ceiling on the ability for a project like NISA to really achieve its potential, and also serve as kind of a guide and a link point for other leagues to connect beneath them. Right now, I don't see anything above them that they could link to, but definitely beneath them that they could link to. It'd be important for something in the, de facto Division IV level, because U.S. Soccer doesn't sanction Division IV, to basically kind of connect to NISA at the bottom, and then you can have that conversation about promotion and relegation. But then, now we're looking back at how do we handle the professional league standards. So when you look at the clubs in NISA, the clubs with the Founders Cup, these other clubs around the country, NPSL, UPSL, etc. How do we get them to connect together and really have a good conversation about doing what's best for soccer in this country?
Yeah, I think that there are many club owners who have a good understanding of what that takes. And I think those people need to work together. There are people within NISA who I think are very reasonable people, who can have that conversation. There are people in the Founders Cup who I think are very moderate, type of folks who can have that conversation, and I think you have to let MPSL as well, I think those folks need to stop, and they need to realize that fighting against each other is pointless. It's not accomplishing anything. Whether I get things exactly my way, or I have to give a little bit, up and compromise. If we're united, we're going to be stronger against the very organized MLS and USL groups, and that, that giving a little bit and compromising a little bit from those different parties. It's really like four parties, right? Because the Founders Cup and MPSL are sort of separate at this point. So you're talking about NISA, you're talking about Founders Cup, you're talking about MPSL, and you're talking about UPSL. And there's more parties than that, but that's plenty to start with. Finding common ground around how they can work together, I think is essential to all of their survival. And I think it's going to take some of kind of the more moderate voices in those groups to, sort of band together and convince the others, that like, hey, listen, we need to work together, because what we're doing right now isn't working, and the direction it's heading in isn't looking great, right? So we need to turn this ship around, and we need to do it as in an organized fashion and a coordinated fashion. So whether that means NISA sits at the top as the pro league, sanctioned league, whether that means that there's some type of greater association that gets formed. I mean, the word association in NISA was put there on purpose by Peter and Jack when they created it, right? When they created the concept, they saw it as a larger system, right, of leagues. How do you put people's egos aside and get them to understand that, like, we need to work together and form into that type of cohesive system of leagues, for us all to survive and not to get picked off one by one, right? And I think UPSL has now seen, because of that, lawsuit that I personally think is pretty frivolous, that they're vulnerable to it as well. They can't just sit on the sidelines and watch MPSL get torn apart and reap the benefits of that. They're next, right? That's how this works. It's like, you'll watch the other guy get picked off. You're the one who's next.
Totally. Well, Chris, thanks for coming on the show and having a great conversation about NISA, about soccer in this country, and obviously the CEO search, etc. How can people follow your work and read the stories that you're covering and the work that you're putting out there?
Sure. So one way is to visit midfieldpress.com. Most of my longer form writing goes on there. And then you can also follow me on Twitter. It's just my last name, K-I-V as in Victor, L-E-H-A-N as in Norm. And that's my Twitter handle. So you can follow me on there, and that's a little bit more frequent, but in shorter bursts.
Well, I love reading your work. I love our chats online, offline, etc. They're always great, and I really do appreciate you coming on the show, spending some time with us, and talking American soccer. We look forward to having you back on again soon.
Great. Thanks, Daniel. Have a great day.
Thank you. That is Chris Kivlahan with Midfield Press. I appreciate him coming on the show and spending some time with us. Our sponsor this half hour is Charity Water. You can learn more about Charity Water at charitywater.org. They are changing lives, changing villages all over the world, and you can be a part of that story by going to charitywater.org. We'll be right back after this.
No one, no man, no woman, no child should ever have to drink green water with bugs, with algae, with disease in it. Bad water, lack of toilets, kills more people than all the wars in the world. We know how to bring clean drinking water right now to every single person on earth. And when you can bring water into communities, it truly transforms them. It changes everything. Or you could know that you'd made a difference. You could know that you had truly impacted the life of a family, of a community, of a region. There was either clean water or there wasn't. We believe in a world where every single person has clean and safe water to drink, and we will continue fighting until that happens.
Welcome back into the show. Thanks for tuning in this Wednesday morning, June the 26th. I'd really like to say a big thanks to Chris Kivlahan for spending some time with us today, talking through NISA and NPSL and UPSL and all of the ramifications of unification, as well as some of the issues with the U.S. Soccer Board of Directors. Thanks for tuning in today. As we look at the Women's World Cup, things are pointing to and shaping up for a big match, France and the U.S. And I know all eyes are going to be on that. Yesterday, Italy finished up 2-0 against China, and the Netherlands 2-1 against Japan. And it's one of those. One of those things where we're starting to see, good teams are going to start going head to head and getting knocked out. Norway, England tomorrow, ahead of the France and U.S. match coming up. So stay tuned, everyone. It's going to be an exciting finish to the Women's World Cup in France. We look forward to seeing everybody again tomorrow. As always, you can watch live on DanielWorkman.com. Weekdays live at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we will be having a big announcement coming up later this week about some really exciting news. So stay tuned for that. We'll see everybody again tomorrow. Goodbye.